Contractors today are going to wake up in a few years, I'm afraid. If they haven't really embraced technology, they're going to be behind significantly, and the catch-up is going to be expensive if it's even achievable. Augment your talent with technology. Take all of that manual burden off their plate and let them do what they do best. Pre-construction right now is a lot of fragmented workflows that are really not supported by anything except for everybody's ad hoc made up Excel spreadsheets and Word documents. All of the other conditions present in pre-construction are not addressed in any form of a systematic, holistic way. So our focus is to unite all of the data, digitize and unite all of the workflows. We can grab all of that data, structure it, and put that to use for the stakeholders in the project.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Design Development, your hub to learn direct from top performers in real estate development, design, and construction. I'm your host, Renz Hayes, founding partner of H&O, lifelong learner, and I am personally obsessed with high-powered organizations and the leaders that guide them. If this is your first time listening, thank you so much for tuning in, and if you're a returning listener, welcome back. Let's go. For today's episode, I have a decorated 26-year construction veteran, Steve Dell'Orto, and he is the new founder and CEO of ConCntric, which is a new software, and it's transforming the fragmented pre-construction industry. He grew the western region of a national general contractor to over $2 billion a year, and he managed over 500 people doing that. His portfolio is unparalleled. He did the Chase Center, that's the home of the Golden State Warriors. He did the Salesforce Tower. He did the Washington State Convention Center. So he's worked on projects at scale. I can't wait to share this conversation with you. I'm really excited to see ConCntric take off. And I think if you're in construction, development, design, you're going to want to know about it because it's going to help pre-construction and planning a new development. So without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Steve. Please join me in welcoming Steve. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Renz, it's great to be on your podcast. So excited for this conversation.
All right. So I'm excited to introduce and talk about ConCntric and the fractured pre-construction environment. But first, I think everyone needs to learn a little bit about you and your 26-year career in construction.
I started just in building things and just really appreciating construction and finding, I think that's where a lot of my, everybody's got talent in something, and I think I found mine in construction. So I just had some great connections at the very beginning of my career in college, and so kind of fell into it a little bit. But I'm not going to bore you from the very genesis of my career here. But yeah, I spent 26 years growing within a top 10 general contractor and ultimately leading the Western Division of a top 10 general contractor. And, it was an incredible growth story. I started with the Western Division when it was a handful of projects and a couple $100 million in revenue. And as a team, we collectively grew it in stages, but ultimately by the time I left, we were over $2 billion on a sustained basis for 5 or 6 years. So it was a lot of fun growing the business. And, in your career, when you get involved in construction, whether it's the real estate side or the design side or the building side, I found that I just got my kicks with walking the job site, being on the job site, and you've got all the big equipment and the steel flying and the concrete, and that was really cool. And I got into maybe the middle stage of my career where it really became about the team and the people, because now as you grow your career, you become more and more responsible for people, their career paths, the things that they're looking to do personally and accomplish, and how can you support that? And that was a lot of fun. And then in the tail end of my career, it was that plus, really looking out for the interests of all stakeholders on the projects, and how can you drive project success and do it in a way that everybody's winning and trusting each other and collaborating. And, these days, unfortunately, it takes more work than you would think, but you have a lot of great people in the industry all trying to do great things. But there's just oftentimes you just got to get obstacles kind of pulled out of their way to really unlock that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it was a fun career, accomplished a lot, besides just the growth of the company. We grew our team to over 500 people. And
It's incredible growth. So you're running a Western division for a national company, and you're responsible for growing. Obviously, it is a team environment. You went from 1 to 4 offices, and you grew that to 500 people. And what you said there, you became more responsible for the people. It's about putting people in a position to succeed, not necessarily you managing a project or doing the buyout, right?
that's right.
The total pivot. So could you tell us a little bit about your career? Like, how did you get to that position and that opportunity? Did you feel like you were ready for the opportunity to scale the Western division? Like what created that opportunity for you? How'd you seize it?
Oh, it's never it's never that easy. I really focused at every stage of my career to just master everything in front of me, not to necessarily rush to the next stage without feeling, you know, somewhat prepared. You never are ready for the next step, but you also have to be bold enough to take that next step and be committed to figuring it out. And I think that's what I did. And I also tried to not stay in any one particular swim lane either. So all the time that I spent managing projects and being out in the field in a more operational role, I was always trying to find an excuse to get into the office and help out. In the early stages of my career, we were still, the industry was still doing a lot of just bid work. But over time, as that evolved and you're doing more and more collaborative delivery oriented projects, then you're spending a lot of time in meetings just planning the work. And so, even though that was somewhat double duty, for me, it was an opportunity to learn the other side of the business, which I think worked out very well for me, because as I had that opportunity to transition from just that operational project level role into more of a business unit and corporate leadership and growth, knowing both sides of the business, both the operation side and how to set the table on the front end with the deals and the work acquisition, was something that I at least had some experience with.
Instrumental into that opportunity, right? And
Yeah.
something you pointed out, you took every chance you could to get back into the office to get exposure to that side of the business, because without the exposure, you might never get the opportunity. So you took it upon yourself to go expose yourself, have the right conversations, meet the right people, right?
And learn the front end of the business is very different and very unique compared to, say, the operational project management skill set. So
100%. It's totally different. It's the Peter principle, right? Like, the technician becomes the best technician in the company. They need a promotion. It's like, hey, you're promoted to manager. Like, but that's a totally different skill set.
Right.
Same thing applies in this type of career path too. We're having a lot of conversation right now on the path from, say, a project manager in a structural design firm, structural engineering firm. What's the path from project manager to associate or principal executive level? Like, what's the different in skill sets? What's the different skill sets? What do you have to expose them to? What conversations should they be trying to have? That's the difference, right?
yeah, and I think within our industry, and it probably applies to other industries as well, but there's an art and a science to what you do. And the science you can teach and you can kind of almost script and train, but the art of it is experiential. It's it's the human touch. It's your bedside manner. It's your ability to work with people,
100%.
and take risks and be comfortable taking those risks. So there's the art of it as you grow and you get out of actually doing, and then you're doing more managing than you're doing. That's a critical transition point for people in any career, and being able to effectively manage a team, get the most out of that team, and help them and support them to be successful, ultimately, yield success for the organization. So,
So well said.
it's fine art.
It is a fine art, right? It's intuition. Growing any kind of company to 2 billion is impressive in itself, but I think the project portfolio is worth mentioning. Could you share some of the projects you're most proud of from that time?
I don't think there's any one. There's a lot of stories that, a fantastic hospitality project I did that was, a couple of phases, and it was maybe $10 million and then upwards of 30 with all the phases combined. was one of my most favorite ones down in Southern California because we had an owner, we had an architect, a design team, and we had our building team, including our trade partners. And there we were able to really come together and achieve a high level of trust with a person who's a friend to this day of mine that was the owner. And, he was on the East Coast and he would come out every 2 weeks to check on the job. And he's a super builder himself, but he entrusted us to the point where we had delegated authority to make whatever call we needed to, even spending, in essence, committing the owner's money to renovate and reposition this great resort project. And to me, once you achieve that level of trust and you have, full command of the big picture of what the overall objectives are for your client, for the project, and to be entrusted that way, for me, that was like one of the biggest, say, compliments, the biggest rewards that I've achieved in my career. I could rattle off the Salesforce Tower, I could rattle off the Golden State Warriors Arena and Uber headquarters. I mean, those are marquee projects, but when it really comes down to having your team be trusted and at that super high performance level and bringing everybody together, that to me was magical. But, we had some there's several of these projects that are still ongoing, believe it or not. But, the projects I was involved in and helping set the table for success with the team, with the owner, very proud that the Washington State Convention Center that's in Seattle just literally in January got their certificate of occupancy, and it's an enormous building. And that team from start to finish was involved in that project for 7 years, a couple, 3 years of pre-con, building it for 4, obviously a lot of overlap, but an extraordinary accomplishment and a beautiful building. So yeah, very proud of the portfolio of projects that I was a part of.
Your response to that question, to me, speaks volumes about your character. You have one of the more impressive resumes from a portfolio standpoint. Massive convention center, Golden State Warriors Arena, right? Tall towers. And your first response to this was talking about the importance of a relationship and how much trust you earned and how that owner, that client became a close friend and still is today.
Yeah.
That's, at the end of the day, those are the things that become most rewarding. The portfolio items almost become, they're like shiny objects that you're excited to work on. They're challenging, like they're a badge of honor. But at the end of the day, they're just another badge. And what really means a lot to me, and it seems like it means a lot to you, is the relationships that you build along the way. The journey's the better part.
Yeah, for sure. That's that certainly was what has always motivated me.
You talked about having a reputation and getting consistent repeat work despite being the high fee service provider, right? You guys were not the low fee. You weren't competing as a commodity, and you used collaborative approaches to these developments, like a CM at risk. Could you expand on that a little bit? Like, how does a CM at risk contract agreement, how is that collaborative, and like how is that value proposition so successful for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of different, say, technical labels relative to the contract delivery method. Mm-hmm. But the real distinction is, when I started my career, so we're talking about decades ago, the most common form was, a lump sum bid, hard bid, design bid, build, whatever you would want to call it. Mm-hmm. And, fundamentally, owners would hire the design team and they would, for the most part, design in full all the way through permit, the complete set of documents, and then they would put it out on the street for basically a low bid competition. Yeah. And, that just it would rarely work out to where that was just like a fun experience. So the industry has really, over the several decades, has moved way away from that. And FMI, I'm not going to quote this right, but something in the order of, by 2025, 87% of all projects will be delivered under some form of collaborative delivery, i.e., the design, bid, build days are numbered. And
wow.
Those that are doing it are almost I know many municipalities are constrained by their administrative code. They don't have a choice, even though they
Yeah.
want to make some form of best value selection and bring all the partners, the critical partners to the table early in the process because they know the outcomes
Hmm.
are better. But yeah, so the collaboration of bringing the design team and the build team along with the owner at the right stage, but the earlier the better, because you're building and forging those relationships, but you're also aligning the design and the cost and the plan and the timetable from the very beginning and working together to maintain all of those gears and levers and all the things involved in pre-construction as a team. And it's hard when you get too far down the road and you throw a new team member too late in the stage and they have different opinions, or maybe they've picked up on things that weren't being addressed. And then it can become counterproductive and wasteful because you're having to almost roll things back, and it becomes a domino effect oftentimes, and then you're
Can
ending up
waste time doing that, right?
wasting time. People are spending a lot of people hours, redoing work, design work, budget work, planning work, and it's not very productive.
I often refer to the project planning phase as like the most critical part of an entire commercial real estate development. Like that to me as an engineer and as a contractor, as an architect, as a developer, the collective decisions and the hurdles that we identify as a team, like how are we reducing risk? How are we capturing opportunity, right? Having all of the key partners at a table is so powerful. And if you can have an effective project planning stage, the rest of the job becomes easy.
I was touting that for years, and I did it also because I think on the contractor side, the front end of the business, where the pre-construction professionals, that's their career path,
Mhm.
I think is probably one of the most underappreciated and least celebrated of the career paths. I think a lot of people are drawn to, like I mentioned earlier, the flying steel and the concrete and all of the yellow iron. It's fun. It's visible. You'll have your friends walking the sidewalk and they can see that you're involved in that project. But the front end of the business, where you set the table, the strategy, how do you drive risk out of the project, the collaboration with amazing professionals in the design category, if you will. It's just, number one, it's a lot of fun. Number two,
Mhm.
you see a lot of different projects over the course of your career, more so than if you're
In
managing a project
pre-construction.
in pre-construction. And
Yeah.
so I used to just really help celebrate that career path and really rebalance that level of appreciation, because I think it is the most critical. It's where, risk, profitability, ROI on the asset, all of these critical things that make a huge difference to all the stakeholders, that's where that gets established. And you need the best and brightest people and the true builders thinking through all of that alongside the design partners, alongside the owner, whether they're a public agency or a private developer. It is very much the most critical
It is
stage.
brilliant. It is brilliant to celebrate that career path in construction because you're 100%. I often refer to estimating or pre-construction. It's like a thankless job oftentimes, especially when we're going back to the design, bid, build world, right? Because they're bidding something that's already designed. They weren't involved in any of the decision making. They're handed a set of plans and a couple weeks worth of time, and it's like we need an all-in price. And if you win, it's what you miss. And if you lost, it was like you were too conservative. Now we don't have the work and we lost the job, right?
Right. The incentives
But
are just not aligned well.
they're not aligned. They're not aligned. And to your point, no matter how good your execution is, if your estimate's wrong, you're going to lose. And you're wasting all of those resources and the opportunity cost of that time spent. It's a huge, huge, huge risk in construction.
It's
Really
not
is.
just the estimate, keep in mind, and that's another thing that I really try to make sure everybody becomes more and more aware of. The estimate itself is the quantity and cost inventory and detail of what you see, but there's a lot of things that influence that cost that are part of the broader array of pre-construction workflows and efforts. The contract, the insurance strategy, the permitting strategy that gets put in place very early on, the quality of how you want to build it and having that reflected in the design, as well as the quality of the design. These are all things that everybody's touching in pre-construction, and when it's done right, all of those things are managed well and they're all accounted for, so that way the estimate itself is reflective of the market conditions with your, what I would call the go-to-market strategy, and how you are going to bring on or bid out the subcontractor work. All of that combined is what you're doing in pre-construction. It's not just the estimate, but the estimate itself is somewhat, it's the temperature gauge. All these outside influences make the mercury go up or down. So just think of the estimate as the thermometer, but the broader environment is really what the thermometer is reacting to. And so you have to account for all of those other conditions if you're going to do pre-construction the right way.
What you put into that environment, the environment you create around those gauges, the thermometer that you're referring to, really matters.
It does. It does.
That's the perfect opportunity to introduce your newest venture, ConCntric.
I appreciate
what
that.
you're trying to do is you're trying to solve a fragmented pre-construction environment. And there we are, the environment around the estimate, right? The gauge. Could you tell us exactly what ConCntric is all about? Like, what are you up to?
Well, we are the first holistic platform addressing the needs in pre-construction, and we have a hyper focus on the entirety of the pre-construction segment with a project focus. This isn't a platform that is solely being built to serve the contractor or solely being built to serve the owner or the designer. The idea is, if you serve the project well and its critical stakeholders, then everybody wins and everybody succeeds. So as I described, pre-construction right now is a lot of fragmented workflows that are really not supported by anything except for everybody's ad hoc, made up, Excel spreadsheets and Word documents. There's some great estimating software tools that, are what I described as the thermometer, if you will, but all of the other conditions present in pre-construction are not addressed in any form of a systematic, holistic way. So our focus is to unite all of the data, digitize and unite all of the workflows, and most importantly, also unite all the people involved in one place, because when you do that, you have a single source of truth that everybody can draw from for their respective workflows, which I think is going to really help generate a higher degree of collaboration and trust. And when you are leveraging all of that data that currently is just leaking through everybody's fingers like a sieve, when we can grab all of that data, structure it, and put that to use for the stakeholders in the project, now you have a certainty of outcome that, is unparalleled and almost unachievable today without having a more holistic solution in place to pull all of that together. And I just saw it too many times sitting in those meetings, leading the pre-construction or supporting a team that, is doing the pre-construction on all those amazing projects that we talked about. But they're fighting a fight with one hand tied behind their back, and the fight is not against each other. The fight is against, all of the risk, all of the cost pressures, all of the things that they're having to manually try to figure out and tackle. And it's too much. It's to do it manually in the kind of the current analog fashion. It has to change. There's way too much of that built environment that needs to be built to handle the population growth that we're seeing. We have the baby boomer generation is leaving the workforce, and all of that knowledge and expertise is going with them.
There's a lot of intellectual property in the baby boomers' minds, right?
There is. Well, there's just a tremendous amount of knowledge, and ultimately, contractors today are going to wake up in a few years, I'm afraid, if they haven't really embraced technology, they're gonna be behind the ball significantly, and the catch up is going to be expensive if it's even achievable. The wave is coming,
Yeah.
and of the wave of work, and if you want to capitalize that, quite honestly, if you want to survive, you have to do something to augment the talent that you have, because there's just not going to be enough of the talent to handle it. And really, the
100%.
only way to solve that, there's no silver bullet, but one of the big ones is, augment your talent with technology. Take all of that manual burden off their plate and let them do what they do best: relationships, planning, all of the thought work, and let all the computation and all of that stuff that can be handled and supported with a more sophisticated, technology backbone and platform.
100% in support of new technology, especially in an industry that's going to be struggling with workforce too. And this is separate from the labor side of things, but this is in the office. And if you have a unified software, that also makes training and getting people up to speed in newer technology and how things are done much easier. I want to understand and help everybody listening understand exactly how ConCntric functions. So who would be your direct customer? I know we understand the entire. So a developer, a general contractor, are the subs going to see this? The design consultants, like who's the one that buys the initial software, or like how is it monetized, and then everybody else is a collaborator? Is that how it works?
Yeah, right now, the contractor, design builder, the builder side of the equation is who we're introducing this to first. They bring it to the project. It's basically unlimited use, unlimited, users and number of projects, because we want to really promote that collaboration. We want people to be invited, and we don't want to have any barriers that prevent that from happening. But ultimately, it's the environment in which you can take very few inputs, the estimate being one critical input, and now take all of the data and all of that detail that's otherwise being summarized and organized in widely used standards, whether it's master format or uniformat, but make all of that information now presentable and understandable, and not just points of time, but what is the trends over time, from the very beginning to the conclusion of that pre-construction phase of the project. So that way everybody can actually see and have access to what is going on the project from a cost perspective relative to both the projected estimate, or the projected cost, and the desired target budget, the program from a gross square footage perspective, and the other key uses and drivers, as well as how do you also leverage all of your prior experience and bring that forward in a comparative way, so that way you can be assured that where your project is trending is in line with what you would consider to be the market, or where you want to be relative to the market.
So multiple projects. So your data from all of your projects is going to be kind of like summarized into a dashboard that then becomes your measuring stick for the next job to know, is my steel cost in line on a cost per square foot with this project? And then you start to have comparable data.
Well, that's the beauty of our platform approach, is that those are different jumping off points. So all of that data being within the platform, but structured in a careful way that we as builders and people within the industry really know how that data needs to be consumed, how that data needs to be presented and organized. It's hard for people outside of our industry to come in and understand the complexities and the exact information and metrics that people from within the industry come into the office at 6:30 in the morning with their cup of coffee and need to see to make all of the decisions they need to make. So we're, as a platform, serving the project, so that way we can leverage that data within a project to support all the different workflows, particularly as we continue to grow more and more and modules of the platform, but to also have that data become historical information for the next project that can also guide your decisions at the project level, but also aggregate up, so that way at the enterprise level, when you were in the position that I was in, we would have, dozens, if not, upwards of 100 active pre-construction projects, whether it was a design build job where we were on the hook for the budget, or if it was just a favor we were doing for a customer just to conceptually price something. But ultimately, understanding everything that's going on across your enterprise, or if you're the vice president of pre-construction, having that view of all of those projects all coming up together to tell you how does your portfolio of projects look, which ones may be in a little bit of trouble, et cetera. So, and having all of that be very dynamic, not just static reports that you could otherwise get out of like a Microsoft BI, which I think is what people, all these business intelligence tools today that aren't built specifically for our industry, people are having to use, but they don't have the data either. So then they hire several people to clean the data, push it through that. They get the reports, they look at them in their static state, and then a different view requires them to rinse, repeat. It's an enormous waste of G&A for any company, and I don't think it provides them the full value and the full picture that they really need to see when you have that live streaming data that's, you know, up to the minute every second, really.
It's a big lift to create custom dashboards for like company-wide or industry-wide like data. It really is. So I can see the power of a platform like ConCntric knowing exactly what data the industry needs and being pre-programmed to already provide that out of the box.
Each company and even each down to the person, they're generally doing things in a very similar way, and there's just these subtle differences that make it unique, or even if it's just a format. But being in the industry, you generally know across the board this is the standard way that people are really measuring progress, success, risk, whatever. So this level of customization that I think people are afraid that they're giving up, they're really not. You know, there's a little bit of that, and you can't ignore the need for flexibility, but it's not like everything has to be uniquely custom time and time again, because, I mean, I think that's a little bit of how we've gotten to where we are in the industry, is just this belief that every project is so dramatically different that I have to have Excel and contort it in all these different ways each and every time. And that's just not really reality. And, you know,
Not productive either.
it's not productive. So I think the gain of productivity, of all the things you can achieve by leveraging your data, you know, many multiples pays for itself in terms of giving up a little bit of that customization and embracing a little bit of change. The rewards are humongous, and that's where our industry is starting to already go. I mean, everybody is, you know, I'm really energized by the fact that the industry is really starting to become far more tech focused and embracing of technology. And I think a lot of people have, you know, commented on our industry being very antiquated, slow to embrace technology. And, you know, I don't think that's really the entire case. I don't think that's a fair lens to look at our industry. I think
Hard to
everybody,
do at scale. It's just a mature industry, so that's the easy thing to poke at.
yeah, and quite honestly, I think, you know, technology has to meet the industry halfway too. You actually have to build, you know, a product that is easy for them to use.
That
and
works, yeah.
works and, you know, does what they need it to do, not some generic piece of software that's force fit to move into our vertical. You know, that's why I think us being a platform built for builders by builders is, you know, I think it's unique. I think it makes a huge difference, and our customers and all of the interest we've seen in a very short period of time in our lifespan as a company has been huge. I think they've been waiting for this, and now it's here, and they're getting excited.
I'm interested to understand the ROI or the feedback you're getting from early adopters. So like, what were they doing previously, and like how did their life improve by switching to ConCntric? Like, what hurdles were they able to overcome?
When you talk to the actual pre-construction person leading the efforts, you know, the first thing that they'll flag is the massive inefficiency under which they're operating. You know, a lot of redundant data entry, all of that stuff. So they're having to field a massive
Could we
amount
talk
of
about
work.
that redundancy just to kind
Yeah.
of create insight into that? If I speak from my experience, I'm a structural engineer, but I also grew up in the structural steel industry and built an entire estimating process for structural steel. So in my world, redundancy was having to bid things 1,000 times. Like, hey, what do you think at SD? Can you bid the DD, now the permit, now the CDs? And like, okay, now can you drop 5%? It's like, I've already priced this thing 4 times.
Right.
So what redundancy are these pre-construction managers facing?
A lot of times you're doing work at a conceptual level in an Excel, estimate that you've whipped up, and then when you start getting more further down the road, you have to transition that format, that estimate, re-break up the numbers in a different way to put it into a different format. And then when you want to go and engage the subcontractor market in some form of bid process, now you're re-entering those numbers in a different way. That's just like one example.
For
You're in
sure.
a project and you need to do these little cost studies for something specific outside of the estimate. You're creating another estimate, you're populating that. Everybody's value engineering workbook in Excel. There's, very little, there's a lot of constraints to be able to really track, how you're building up the value of that option. And, they're trying to cobble all of this together in an Excel workbook. And an owner says, well, can I see it in a graph? Well, now you're graphing with an Excel, which is always a pain in the neck. So just the inefficiency of data transference, having to go back in old files and bring forward data from past projects and normalize it. Huge waste of time, but critically important information that's just not at their fingertips. So that's one.
That can be a mess. It's messy. So you're often trying to like fix and manipulate data to just reposition this one thing.
That's how errors are made. That's how people lose money. We have customers on a different, ROI focus already presenting this as part of their competitive RFI, competitive interview process, because, these days owners are, procuring the work on a best value basis. And for the most part, and I've had owners tell me this, look, if I've pre-selected 3 or 4 general contractors, I know by reputation, they know how to build it. It's going to get built on time. But what is sorely lacking is any of them coming to me with a sophisticated way that they're going to set the table for success. So that way, that predictability that I want, that general experience through the entire process as we're working through this for years, what is that going to be like? And they look at that and they said, Steve, that is just a massive black hole. And people come in and you can tell they're just ad-libbing, they're verbally describing the way they do pre-construction. But if you pull back the curtain, you look and, it's like the Wizard of Oz. You got this magic that you thought you had, but it's just somebody back there
That's funny.
running on a treadmill and pulling a bunch of levers, and you just go, okay, that's not terribly sophisticated. So our customers are already winning work as, a differentiator and as a measure of ROI. If you're able to free up more bandwidth because you're making your team far more efficient, because we're eliminating all that manual work. Now they have more swings at the plate. More swings at the plate, means you have a chance of not only winning more work just by probability and, statistically, but
Yeah.
you're setting yourself apart from the rest of the pack because you are filling that void now with something that's much more sophisticated. It's software. It's not made up Excel spreadsheets. Owners gravitate towards it because they're taking a huge gamble with the investment they're making, and they should expect that there should be some level of outcome that they can not lose sleep at night every night for 5 years.
I'm going to share 2 takeaways that I grasped from that conversation. One is what the data is actually being used for, and the importance of having data provided in the same way time after time after time. The repetition is what builds familiarity with what the data means. And the point of data isn't to let data necessarily make a decision. It's to improve the judgment of the team and the individual. So it's it's not super critical that it's like perfect or positioned. Like you talked about, every job's like crazy different. So we got to do something different on this one. It's like, make the process the same, keep it simple so that you get the data, you understand the data better, and you can make better decisions.
Yes.
And we already talked about the second point. Project planning, in my opinion, and I think you agree, is the most important part of the entire development. And
Hands
what
down.
we're doing in pre-construction here is we're streamlining and removing redundancy and wasted efforts on tasks that aren't necessarily providing more value, reorganizing data, trying to grab old data and bring it back to the conversation, right? And so what does that do? That frees up time for some of the most important people in your business to focus on high quality, high value tasks and conversations, and it frees up their mind to think about how to create value rather than how am I going to find the time to do all of these extra tasks.
Correct. And I think it also provides an environment that you can bring in the operational folks where, our projects were always the most successful if especially the superintendent that was going to ultimately build the job can be brought in at the early stages to help plan it from a logistics standpoint, a phasing standpoint, schedule. And so if we as a platform can create an environment that it's a lot easier and efficient for them also to come in and be a part of that team, but maybe even remotely from their job site, because now you're doing your pre-construction in a cloud-based platform like ConCntric as opposed to phone calls and emails and trading Excel spreadsheets and having all of those complications. Your project, your outcome, your plan is going to be much better. And the interface with the design team can be far more streamlined and direct, and bringing everybody either virtually or just together in general in any form to be using that same data, to be guided by that same data, and for the design team to have access to tools that help them manage the process alongside the developer, alongside the builder, I think helps everybody as well. I mean, think about also the owner. They're managing a project through the lens of a pro forma. 70% of that pro forma is, from a cost perspective, is the hard costs that are being managed by the general contractor. So having all of that data available to feed into tools that we built for them from a pro forma management perspective and all of that, I think when we get to that point of maturity with this platform, the benefit is, it's 360 degrees all the way around. And that's what ConCntric stands for. It's really how to amplify the value of that data for everybody on a 360-degree basis, how to bring everybody together collaboratively, and similar to like the bullseye, really help drive a precision of outcome, a precision of what you're planning and budgeting based on all of this other data now becoming super powerful to you to really help drive accuracy and precision. Because ultimately, with ConCntric, we aim to make the built environment more affordable, predictable, and sustainable. And you do that with data. You do that with very reliable and consistent process that you mentioned before, and bringing everybody together.
The developer value there, like you said, 70% is hard cost that's managed by the GC. And now they have a platform, an all-in-one platform, where that data is given to them in a visually appealing way, in an easy digest way. And is the intent that they're going to have access to this platform whenever they want to like have a feel on where project development is going?
Yes. I mean, whoever is the subscriber naturally controls, the permission levels.
So we could just cut them out if we wanted to, but
by design, the platform is intended to be very inclusive and very collaborative, and all of the feedback we've gotten from our customers, each party, they have their own personal company sensitive information, and everybody respects that.
Sure.
But the lion's share of all the data and the information is really
right
project data, project information, and nobody has a problem sharing that, but nobody has anything systematic that ultimately can tap into that data and do something with it in a meaningful way. And that data currently is unstructured, so there's not a whole lot, if you wanted to, that you could do in its present state. And that's where ConCntric by uniting the data and the workflow and bringing people together is going to make a huge difference.
All right. And do you see ConCntric being used throughout construction as well? Does it go on to be a part of project management and or like in a budget comparison to actual versus the pre-construction estimate?
I mean, pre-construction is it's wide open. There's so much that needs to be addressed in pre-construction that our focus, we are just hyper focused on
Pre-construction.
And we're an open platform
There's a
too.
ton of competition in the construction management space, but they all ignore the pre-construction process, right?
What they're doing about it, I don't know. I think fundamentally it's hard for people to understand if they haven't lived and breathed it. And so that's
100%.
where we can be very effective. And, we're an open platform, so it's very easy through APIs to interface with the project management platforms. I don't think the industry needs another one. What they really need is something focused on pre-construction. But I think there's also completed project information that, we're collaborating with a lot of other startups to try to leverage that kind of knowledge flywheel, if you will, to be able to take what actually occurred and how things ended up and bring that back in to help elevate the intelligence of, for the next project, what you should account for. Are you systematically over time missing the same things and you have a kind of a root cause problem to solve in pre-construction? But there's a lot of knowledge through that kind of collaboration that I think our motivation is to really solve things for the customer. It's not about competing and doing things in a competitive fashion against other technology companies. It's really, how do we bring all of this together? Because for too long, it's been way too fractured. And there's just this big gaping hole in pre-construction that we're going to be focused on.
Focusing on customer success is a winning strategy, Steve. There's no doubt.
Always has been.
Always has been. I love what you're doing. I think there is a big need for a platform like yours in pre-construction. So I applaud you on all of the efforts and the software you've created. There's a lot of builders in our network and tuning in today. So I'd love to share with them, like, where can they learn more about ConCntric? Are there demos available? How do they learn more about the software?
Yeah, just come to our website, ConCntric.com. That's ConCntric.com, and book a demo. And we'll show you and give you the grand tour of the platform. And would love to engage in dialogue about those pain points and whatnot that they see in the future that we can also be addressing together. So appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I would say this type of platform and this thought process is even more critical in a year like 2023, right? We have economic uncertainty out there. So pre-construction planning is more important than ever, right?
Look, we will always encounter the high times and the low times, but, just accuracy and having full command of whatever you're doing never goes out of style. So through the good times and bad times, that's the common denominator, and that's what we're serving.
There you go. So to close out today, I'm going to ask a few questions, and again, appreciate your time. The first is, what's the 5-year vision for ConCntric? What can we expect from you?
Well, I think you can expect that we're going to be building the platform very rapidly, moving through all the different ecosystems and modules because we know it so well. We have an incredible team at ConCntric that, we have the best and brightest building this platform. So speed and quality and just that level of engagement with our customers over 5 years, just, put on your seatbelt. It's going to be a quick ride. And, the industry needs it, and it needs it yesterday. So we're on a mission to do this and not waste any time.
I love that. And I always ask, top book or podcast that you'd have to recommend.
I love history. And, you can really derive a lot of great lessons out of history that still apply to this day. There's a book called Freedom's Forge by Arthur Herman. And Freedom's Forge is about the recognition that the U.S. would be entering into World War II. And before that happening, there was this incredible spin-up of basically the industrialization needed to get ready to enter this huge war, because at the time the U.S. was not prepared at all in terms of all of the things, and it would blow your mind to think about every aspect that you would have to go to war like that. But Bill Knudsen is the main character. It's nonfiction, and what this individual did, and the foresight of a few people to transform existing industries from this old-fashioned way of doing things into this massive industrial complex, I think resonates with me, because our industry is at a state that is not ready for what's coming in the future. And how do we, and the right people, really start to accelerate? How do we get better prepared to be able to handle what is needed to be built, and do it in a thoughtful and very productive way? So that book has always been something that has inspired what's possible, and to think about what Bill Knudsen was tasked with, and what he accomplished on the scale that he did, is very inspirational.
Wow. That is inspirational. You can imagine how big of a task that is, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I love the connection to today's world. And my last question, we're trying to support emerging leaders out there and help pave the way for them. So could you share advice for the emerging leaders out there?
It's all about the team. The leader as an individual, it's not an individual effort. It's really about building and cultivating a team, and doing everything you can to accomplish the goals with the team and through the team, and making each individual and caring about them and their individual needs and goals, as well as the fabric of the team. That's, as an emerging leader, that's a little bit of that art that we talked about at the beginning of the discussion here. And that's just fundamental to be successful as a leader in whatever you're doing. Not in our industry. This applies universally. It's always about the team.
Always about the team. We'll end with that advice. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today. We wish you well with ConCntric. Amazing platform. And again, can't thank you enough.
Appreciate it, Renz. This was a blast. Thank you.
Everyone, can't thank you enough for tuning in today. I hope you got a ton out of today's conversation. And if you could do us one favor, if you did get value, please like, share, and comment. Subscribe on whatever channel you're tuning in on. Please leave a review. It helps us expand and grow and support more people. That's the end goal. We want to bring the insights of these amazing guests to as many people as possible. Thank you.